Officials are rushing to evacuate Americans and Afghan allies with just 6 days left before the U.S. withdrawal is set to end. Thousands are leaving through the country's main airport in Kabul every day, but there are still many people left. President Biden is sticking with his intention to pull out U.S. troops by August 31st. He's also asking the military for other plans if needed. CBS News' Skylar Henry reports from the White House.
The military says it's doing everything it can to make sure every American and Afghan ally gets out of the country before the August 31st deadline.
90 flights total yesterday that left the Kabul airport. That is accounted for 19,000 evacuees now safely out of Afghanistan.
President Biden announced Tuesday that he will not be extending the deadline, but says he has asked the Pentagon and State Department for contingency plans if the withdrawal is not yet complete.
The completion by August 31st depends upon the Taliban continuing to cooperate and allow access to the airport for those who were transporting out.
The president says staying beyond the deadline would be dangerous for U.S. troops.
Every day we're on the ground is another day we know that ISIS-K is seeking to target the airport and attack both U.S. and allied forces and innocent civilians.
Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle are criticizing the administration's handling of the withdrawal and questioning whether the U.S. can complete the operation of getting people out before the deadline.
Don't put a timeline until every American comes home.
Two congressmen, Democrat Seth Moulton and Republican Peter Meyer, made an unauthorized trip to Kabul Tuesday to see the situation for themselves.
Really? We're trying to get people out?
In a statement, they said because we started the evacuation so late that no matter what we do, we won't be able to get everyone out on time. The White House pushed back, saying we advise against any Americans, whether elected or not, attempting to travel to Kabul right now. Skylar Henry, CBS News, the White House.
All right, for more on this, I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Christina Ruffini. Christina, thank you for taking the time to chat with us today. So break this down for us. What's the latest on the evacuation efforts and how many Americans remain in Afghanistan?
That's a number we don't know. Look, we know a couple weeks ago it was somewhere between 10,000 and 15,000. We also know a lot of those flights have been leaving each day. The problem is how many of those Americans have gotten to the airport and gotten out. Look, yesterday the White House said, if you have any examples of Americans who can't get out, send them to us. Well, we did. I spoke to a woman yesterday who's an American citizen. She lives in New Jersey. She worked as a translator for about 15 years. And because she was an American working on the base, all the Afghans she worked with assumed that she would know how to get them out. And they've been showing up at her house over the last week. She took me around her house over a video call yesterday. She's got about 50 people, including children, disabled children, orphan girls, lots of families all camped out at her home trying to get to the airport and hoping she can save them. The problem is, as we get closer to the deadline, as it gets more crowded at the airport, more crowded at these receiving facilities, we're hearing they're starting to curtail who they're letting through the gates. Originally, if you had a pending SIV, those are those special immigrant visas for translators, people who worked with the U.S. military. If you had a pending application, if you'd been given a processing number, they were letting those people through. More and more, we're hearing that's not the case. If you're an American citizen, if you're a U.S. permanent resident and you can get to the airport, which is really, really hard because there are thousands of feet of wall-to-wall crowds that you got to traverse first. If you can get up to the gate and wave your passport in someone's face, they are coming out and getting you. The problem is they are not coming out and getting SIV recipients. As far as we know, in most cases, sometimes they are. And they are not anymore going out of their way to try to get people with pending SIVs into the airport because they have so many of them. Now, this is not a hard and fast rule. We haven't heard it's an official policy. We actually were told it was not an official policy. But folks on the ground say they are starting to curtail the types of people they let through the gate and really prioritizing Americans and U.S. residents.
Yeah, not to mention, the added complication of trying to get out the military tools and the military machinery that they can get before they fully withdraw. So I want to focus on that troop withdrawal. President Biden is sticking with his August 31st deadline with the withdrawal of all troops. But he did say that could change if needed. What contingency plans are they putting in place, if any?
I mean, none they'll share with us at this point. The other thing you have to think about is, okay, the 31st is that deadline, right? The 31st is the date that they've still said, for now at least, they want all the U.S. military, all the equipment out of the country. What does that mean? Does that mean that the gates are still open until the 31st? Or does that mean 48 hours before they're going to have to stop accepting evacuees so that they can start packing up their own personnel? Let's not forget the U.S. Embassy is operating out of that airport as well. So there's a lot of things that have to get packed up and put on planes in addition to evacuees in order for them to meet that deadline.
As we mentioned, Congressman Seth Moulton and Peter Meyer are receiving a lot of criticism after they took a secret trip to Kabul. What are you hearing about this?
I mean, I think Nancy Pelosi spoke for a lot of people. People are really unhappy. People at the State Department, people at the White House, people of both parties are pretty annoyed with the members of Congress who are a bipartisan pair who decided to go over there. Look, I personally was told I could not get on a flight into Kabul because it would have taken a seat away from an evacuee, and that's not an argument I wanted to press further. There are private charters going in. At this point, I haven't been able to figure out whose private charter these two congressmen were on, so I don't know the capacity. They said that they only took up crew seats. They said they didn't take seats away from Afghans. Look, that's possible. What we've heard for the most part is planes are not the issue, right? Planes are not packed to capacity. That's not the problem. The problem is the processing and the getting the people into the airport. So did they take 2 seats away from, Afghans or Americans who were trying to evacuate? I think that's up for debate. The other bigger issue is the resources and pull it takes when a lawmaker comes in to an active evacuation zone, right? They said they went out and talked to military people, they talked to State Department people, they talked to folks on the ground. Well, those people had to stop whatever they were doing to talk to the congressman, and that's what's getting a lot of criticism right now.
A situation that's getting more dire by the day, just 6 days left until that critical deadline. Christina Ruffini, thank you for your insight as always.
Thanks, Tom.